Good afternoon, everyone. We're just giving a couple of minutes for everybody to connect before we start this webinar. In the meantime, you can start introducing yourselves in the chat, where you come, what you want to learn today. Just give a couple of minutes, please.
Pam, just a question. Did my face, like, it's all around the
Yes, it's mainly your face where we can see right now. Yes.
Okay, yeah, I don't know why it's happening. Check.
Well, good. We're just giving another minute for people to connect.
I will mute my microphone because there's some noise here at home, so I hope we won't interrupt.
For everybody joining right now, we are just giving a couple of minutes for our attendees to join, to settle in. Please leave a message in the chat to introduce yourselves. Tell us where you're coming from, what you expect to learn today. And also, if you have some questions to our panelists, please use our chat. And I guess we can start. So good afternoon, everyone. And a warm welcome to today's webinar, Voices of Change, Research in Gender Transforming Societies. I'm thrilled to be here moderating this important conversation where we will explore feminist interventions transforming urban spaces and communities. Today, we are going to adopt this relaxed coffee table conversation, informal yet insightful, I'm sure. I have my coffee as well here. And joining me are three remarkable researchers whose work pushes boundaries and challenges traditional norms. So allow me to quickly introduce our guests. We have Dr. Fatima Mandu, a lawyer from ZCAS University in Zambia, specializing in ecofeminism and working closely with women minors. We have Professor Melissa Schumacher from Universidad de las Américas Puebla, joining us from Mexico. She is an expert in indigenous traditional knowledge and tactical ruralism, collaborating with indigenous female-led communities. And we also have Dr. Saad Khan from Pakistan, joining us from ISS of Erasmus University Rotterdam, whose work centers on critical men and masculinities, actively engaging men in deconstructing patriarchal norms. To start our conversation, I'd love for each of you to briefly share what initially inspired you to integrate feminist perspectives into your research, and how have you observed your work creating tangible impacts within the communities you engage with? Fatima, perhaps we could begin with you.
Thank you very much, Pamela, and thank you very much for the invitation to this beautiful webinar where we can voice ourselves as women and men, of course. And to answer your question, what really enticed me to talk about gender and bring gender into my research was the mainstreaming of gender into the legal curriculum at the University of Zambia, where I was teaching. It really opened my mind because it made me think that subjects like the law of contract, or the law of obligations as we call it, how does gender fit into the law of contract? And it really made me think, because when you think of it, it doesn't really fit. But when you open yourself to discussion and talk about negotiations, remember, the bargaining power between men and women is not really the same. It has never been the same, I think. And so that opened my mind to say, oh, wait a minute, I can talk about gender from a land perspective, because I research in land. And from land, I went into mining, because mining is associated with land. And what really encouraged me was to say, that mining is a male-dominated career. And how can we now say that we can involve women and remove this stereotype of patriarchal understanding of mining industry being a male-dominated industry? And that's how I got into doing my postdoctoral research on that. I will explain to you in the next part.
Thank you very much, Fatima. That was very insightful. Indeed, mainstreaming gender into the learning curriculum, not only in Zambia, but around the world, is absolutely necessary to speak about gender from different perspectives and from the perspective of our disciplines. I think this is our task here today. Thank you. Melissa, would you kindly share your thoughts?
Yes, of course. We began to work more with gender and especially women perspective since most of our research based on community planning and participatory engagement is based on how women are actively participating in their community. So they are the triggers of environmental fights. Also, they are triggers of taking care of Mother Nature. So it was not obvious, but it was necessary to also adapt this perspective and as part of our decolonial process as well in the university. And I think that's the beginning, no? Because we see how women inspire, especially from rural and indigenous community, to wake up, no, and see what's happening in the context all around. And I think that was one of our inspirations to work with.
Yeah, that was truly insightful, because I think it's very interesting to reflect how women bring the gender and the intersectional perspective into the discussion. But this is something that seems to be rather new, when in reality it has been present in pre-Hispanic, at least, civilizations and societies. So it's important to decolonize that. Yes, please.
Sorry, and I forgot to mention, we are also interested in study these narratives or cartographic narratives in how women's body are the first place of conquest, not the first place of of having exploitation as Mother Nature, as land. No, so it's also to see how the different scales of women in general, from the body, from the house, and from the territory, is being abused and exploited all around.
Thank you very much. I think bringing that to the table is absolutely necessary. Mm-hmm. Women have been the victims of war in a very different way as men have been. Thank you very much. Yes, I would like to hear about Sad's journey now, please.
Thank you, Pamela. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for this invitation, and I'm truly honored to be sharing this panel with such an amazing woman from all over the world. I think it's always a learning experience for me to engage with people from different parts of the world, and especially with women who have been actively engaged in doing research on gender. So my journey basically started back in 2015, when I was able to join the Center of Excellence in Gender Studies in Pakistan. And as part of academia, the first and foremost question for me was how, for instance, gender and feminism is important and is essential for me as a man. Because in Pakistan, we mostly talk about feminism as for women only. But for me, I think being part of Gender Studies department and being part of this academia was to also question how feminism can benefit not only women in particular, but also men in fighting against patriarchy and for the gender justice. And I remember very vividly in the first year, I was reading a book by Bell Hooks when she says that feminism is for everyone. And I think that was the starting point for me, because this idea of feminism as passionate politics is something that triggered my journey into this into gender studies discipline. And from there on, I tend to focus on feminist theorizing, feminist research methodology, but more specifically, I started looking at critical men and masculinities because, again, the question is, the important question for me is to understand how, for instance, patriarchy is being sustained over the period of time through and by the production of toxic masculinity. And for me, I think engaging with the communities is to understand how we can transform those problematic, toxic, hegemonic forms of masculinity into something that we called as passionate, caring masculinities. So for me, I think the journey has been sort of very much informed by feminist principles of activism, feminist principles of academia, and it's very personal to me as well, because I think I feel I'm part of this overall idea of gender justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, indeed, how gender and feminism are relevant to men and to everyone is absolutely important to question and to put on the table. Toxic masculinities, challenging gender roles, I think this is something that we need to debate, because patriarchy is not an illness, it's a form of education that has been perpetuating into many societies around the world. Thank you very much. So thank you for this inspiring reflections. Now I'd like to dive deeper into each of your experiences. Fatima, your work beautifully intersects gender and environmental justice in mining. Could you share a compelling story illustrating how ecofeminist approaches have reshaped how women miners in Zambia perceive their rights and their roles?
Sure. Thank you, Pamela. Yeah, when we were introducing ourselves, I said the next part will be on looking at the second part of my journey. After mainstreaming, I decided to join the postdoctoral research fellowship at University of Zambia, and I commenced my postdoctoral research on the oppression of women and damage to the environment. And my supervisor did not really encourage me to use ecofeminism, because ecofeminist theory has been critiqued a lot. And there are three major critiques to it. The first one is that it places women in one basket. So it's like really stereotyping all different categories of women and saying women abandoned. And that becomes an issue in feminism itself. So my supervisor was a bit reluctant. But then I tried to explain to her that what I was using from ecofeminism was not the theoretical aspects, but more so the activism. And I look at three global activisms which have helped women a lot. It's the Chipko tree hugging in India, which Professor Wanda Shiva does a lot of talks about. Then there is the collapse of the Brazilian dam. And that also really made me think twice that if it was possible that we can be agents of change in terms of women trying to rethink and just become active in what is happening around them and see what can be prevented, I think initially we would not have to grapple with all these problems. And the third and the final one, which really came to sight and which deals with mining, is the feminist table, which emanated in South Africa, which is a result of the Marikana mine strike. And I think that's a beautiful way of introducing feminism through a platform so that women's voices are forward, are in front. They are not behind or not thought about as a vulnerable group behind the scenes. This is the background to my postdoctoral thesis, and my postdoctoral thesis contains 3 book chapters and 2 articles. And the first one looks at how we can perfect ecofeminist theory. And I'm trying to argue that yes, the criticisms are there, but the link between women and nature has to be strongly established. And once we establish that link, And we see that both are being oppressed, especially under environmental justice. We've got a positive point. Next, I also look at the change that activism through ecofeminists can bring about on the ground. The other chapter looked at how we can challenge patriarchal norms in our laws, legislations, and policies. And I give you an example here of the Africa Mining Vision. Unfortunately, it's a regional document, but the woman is absent. The feminist gender lens is completely absent in that document. How can we try and infuse those things into the policy document itself and into the legislation? How can we bring about that change? The next one looks at a case study, which is the Kabwe Black Mountain. And I'm sure Pamela is now very familiar with the Kabwe Black Mountain. And it highlights how a slug heap of lead, which is really a toxic material, has made women try and see how they can eat a living through small-scale mining. Unfortunately, the women were even chased from the slag heap. It has now been cordoned off. And to our dismay, the environment has completely been devastated, and the women have actually been chased away from their own livelihood, from the Kabwe Black Mountain. I also had another article on the mining associations. I wanted to link how mining associations, and especially women mining associations, what can they do? Where is their presence? Are they helping these women? So I've got more questions than answers, unfortunately. So this real life case study is really into addressing how gender and environmental issues can be worked out. Now, the aftermath of my postdoctoral research was, to my great surprise, a case, which was this litigation case started in South Africa and not in Zambia. For the reason being, I'm not going to go into the legal technicality, but just to explain to you why it went to South Africa and not Zambia is because Anglo-American company had their headquarters in South Africa. So the best forum they thought they would get justice from was from the South African High Court. There were a lot of UN involvement in this case. There was the UN Special Rapporteur on Toxic and Human Rights. There was even the UN Rights of the Disabled People, the UN Working Committee on Business and Human Rights. There was the UN Working Group on Discrimination Against Women. All these were included as friends of the court to support this particular case. And what was the case for? The claim was for the damage to the environment and compensation for the women and the children, women of childbearing age and the children. Unfortunately, and I really emphasize this, unfortunately, the case was ruled against the community. And the community was even meant to pay the legal fees for Anglo-American. But fortunately enough, the legal fees were insured, so that was resolved. The court really, on its basis, had one critical argument, and that was a class action was not possible in this matter because justice would not be dispensed with, since every person who had suffered injury suffered it in a different way. Unfortunately, a child who is exposed to lead would have different effects on their health. A woman would have different effects. And in my primary data collection, I came across disabled children who were born due to the high levels of lead in the mother's body at the time she was carrying the child. So you can imagine the effect which was there. Up to today, the levels of lead are extremely, extremely high. And unfortunately, the Anglo-American company expressed sympathy about the whole issue, but denied, because they said that the Zambian government, who was mining lead for the past 20 odd years were responsible for the damage, not them. They would only be responsible if they did anything wrong. According to them, they followed all the requirements, the environmental requirements. And now, having to challenge this court decision would definitely be very, very difficult. My question that arises now is, where was the mining association? Where are they? They were not present at the case. They were not present when I did my primary research. They have been absent everywhere. We talk of feminist theories such as ecofeminism and activism that arises from it. I am trying to see if I can find a solution for this community. And they are at my heart. I really want to enforce this activism so that they can become future change agents.
Thank you very much, Fatima. Thank you. Just to clarify, you're not on this alone. We are working together, and yes, we're trying to challenge this case from our disciplines and from where we can work on. And this also highlights the importance of not only the theory and research about feminism, but also advocating for policy changes, right? And taking a perspective of advocacy and activism. If possible, Fatima, would you kindly share the papers you're talking about? If they are open access, would you share them in the chat for our audience to have access to them?
Yeah, sure. I'll share.
Thank you very much. And well, I would like to move on to Melissa. Melissa, your work focuses on indigenous tradition and knowledge and the leadership of indigenous women. Could you share a specific example from Mexico that demonstrates how indigenous women's knowledge and leadership are transforming urban and rural spaces?
Yeah, of course. We are, well, I'm currently working, we are located in the middle of the country. And in northern mountains of my region, there is a big indigenous population called the Nahua group. And there we are working specifically with women from indigenous organization called Masewal Siwamesh. And they are an extraordinary example of how women organization can make changes, in society, because they began to, like 40 years ago, asking, if we are part of nature, because they began to also mining and natural resources exploitation in the mountains. They were the first to question why this is good for us, why this is progress, if it's not benefiting the community in general terms, and also because in these Nahua communities, for local language, there is no difference between mother nature and people. It's all like unity. And therefore, for them, it's even easier to fight for, because maybe for us that we are more urbanized, even in the Spanish language, we have this difference, between what it's nature, what it's people, what it's mother nature, even, but for them, not. So I love this example because they clearly understand what's their role in this unity, in this concept, that we are all part of, and therefore for them it's easier to fight for, because they are not already colonized and being separated a person from nature. And well, this community is called Quetzalan. It's a very famous town in the middle of the mountains, and maybe because it's already it's very isolated, and it's not so colonized, historically, if we compare with other parts of the world, or even in Mexico. And I think that this isolation helped them to be more integrated, or to be or trying to expel all outsiders that want to especially exploit natural resources. And well, for me, that's our base example. But it's not so different what we are also seeing here in the urban area. I'm located also in Cholula. It's like 3 hours from the mountains. In a completely urbanized area. We are close to a big city, to Puebla, but also the indigenous women here, they have more or less the same feelings and the same thoughts about what's our role in protecting Mother Nature. But here they lost their native language. They don't talk anymore Nahuatl. They don't even being recognized as indigenous because they already urbanized. So the people from the mountains, they're indigenous because they dress like that, they speak like that, and they act like indigenous. But the ones that here in the urban area, no, they are not, because they already urbanized. They don't dress with traditional clothes. They don't speak anymore the language. So they are also, the women especially, they are also fighting for this recognition because they, sadly, being indigenous is more like a political conception here in Mexico, and they need this recognition in order to continue fighting for protection the rural areas, especially specifically here outside the city, because it's funny, how the not funny, but interesting, how we have different actors that are trying to keep the land. In the northern mountains, it's more mining concessions and massive tourism. That's also very, very aggressive. And also here in Cholula, we have private developers, especially real estate developers, that want also to possess the land and transform everything that is rural, everything that is ancestral lands and indigenous lands into gated communities, specifically. So more or less, these are the same problems, different contexts, and that's why we work specifically in these two places.
Thank you. And also different, same problem, but different times as well, because when we're thinking about decolonization with this real estate predatory practices, it seems like it's a neo-colonial approach to land, exactly. Right? Removing indigenous people from, stripping them of their cultural, their land rights. I like the way this has been linking to Fatima's last question, where are the women associations? And you're starting with the example of Masewal Siwamesh and how successful they were in this 40-year work that they have been doing in the hills of Quetzalan. Thank you very much, Melissa. And this brings also another question, right? In terms of the concept of feminism. So the same way as in Nahuatl, there is no separation between humankind and Mother Nature. Why do we need to separate humans from other humans based on our gender, our social condition, our skin color, our identification as indigenous or not, if this becomes like a political question? I would like to move on to Sad in this regard. Your research promotes men's engagement in deconstructing patriarchy. Can you provide some insights into how men transform their traditional views about women and gender roles through such engagement, especially in such a conservative context as Pakistan?
Yeah, I think as I have already started speaking about my own journey, I will continue my discussion over there. So like, for instance, joining gender studies department as a male faculty member, and I'm the only male faculty member. There are other female faculty members who have been teaching. So I remember when I introduced a course on feminist theorizing and feminist research methodology. So I got a huge enrollment from other disciplines of students. And they were only wondering how a man could teach a course on feminist theorizing. So that was also a kind of a surprising element for me. And I started questioning myself and also looking around that why is there any problem of how, for instance, why men are not speaking up for feminism and for women's rights. So that's the primary question that I also had when I started my journey in gender studies department back in 2015. And the other very strong reason was that in Pakistan, as you have rightly pointed out, being in a very conservative society and being part of gender studies department, not only women and girls, but also men and boys have been stigmatized and have been kind of otherized by the society because they are part of a discipline which is not fully accepted in Pakistan as most of the parts in other parts of the world. So for a man specifically who wants to study feminism, who wants to join gender studies department, there's a very strong resistance. And in 2018, because 2018 is a very landmark year considered in Pakistan, because there have been so many different kind of activities that took place that year. It was the year that the fourth wave of feminism started in Pakistan in the form of Aurat March, but at the same time, the transgender women also started activism for their own rights. But at the same time, in 2018, it was also a year which kind of a huge backlash was also kind of mounted against women and feminists and the people who were talking about gender justice in Pakistan. And in the same year, there was a case that was filed against all the gender studies departments in Pakistan, in which it was stated that these departments are basically a Western agenda. They are promoting sort of like homosexuality in Pakistan, which is otherwise criminalized. And that's why, because of that, the entire gender studies departments from Pakistani universities should be banned. So that was also a kind of an alarming event that happened. And all of these events, because I also actively participated in fourth wave of feminists in 2018 as an organizer. So for me, I think the primary question was how I can work with other fellow men in talking about how patriarchal norms and how patriarchal mindset is highly problematic for women and highly problematic for men for different reasons. And that's why I also started a project within my own department in which I basically visited all the gender studies department across Pakistan, and I interviewed and interacted with other men, especially the students and the faculty members who were part of the gender studies department. And the reason I took that research was to understand the experiences of students, male students and male faculty members, and to learn from their experiences how they are teaching, how they are engaging with feminism, and what brings, especially for them, what feminism brings for them in their personal lives. So that research project was very interesting because across Pakistan, as the cultures also kind of different from one part of Pakistan to another part of Pakistan, so are the responses of the respondents were also very different. Some of the faculty members, some of the male faculty members were like they were completely into feminism. They were like fully supported. But it was very surprising for me because like there are some boys and some men who were also part of gender studies department, but they were not fully kind of had an ownership of this the idea of feminism and this idea of gender politics. So these were the researches that I had been engaging with. And for me, I think the important question was to understand how, together with other men, we can transform this patriarchy, the men who support patriarchy, into something that we call as men who are against patriarchy. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It is without doubt very powerful to advocate from a position of privilege versus a position of vulnerability, right? So when we think about your initial question, what is the problem on why men are not speaking up about women and gender rights? I think it's a matter of privilege that are interpreted as rights without understanding that such privileges come at a cost that someone usually more vulnerable than us has to pay with scarcity, with sacrifices, or even with their own lives. Thank you very much. Now, building on this fascinating examples, I'd love to hear briefly from each of you about the complexities of addressing intersecting forms of marginalization, gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, race. How do you tackle this simultaneously in your work? What strategies have you found most effective? Maybe Fatima, can we start with you?
Sure. Okay. When it comes to classifying something as vulnerable, the argument has always been that when you classify women as vulnerable or children as vulnerable, then society looks at them as vulnerable. And I think it's time to change the narrative. Because even when it comes to race, or it comes to gender, or it comes to discrimination as a whole, I think when you classify a group into some classification which denotes the vulnerability part of it, then it seems like that's what they are labeled as. And these are the labels that go throughout, whether it's race, whether it's gender, whatever it is. That's what I have found. That even in my work, within the communities themselves, they will say, oh, this child was disabled. So the child is going to grow up as a vulnerable child and he won't have a full life. So I think it's the labels that we are putting to certain things. And that is becoming difficult to bring about inclusivity. So I feel that there is need to foster coalitions amongst the diverse groups. If there is like 6 diverse groups, can we come in together and bring them together so that we can talk to them through a general feminist lens to say, okay, fine, you are doing something different, but you're also part of the group. You're contributing in a different way, but you are part of the group. Even you look different, but you are still part of the group. So I think I would give you an example of how albinos in Zambia. There was a huge project on how inclusivity can be made available to them. These are the light skinned people who, if they expose themselves to the sun, have the danger of getting radiation, and their skin is very, very sensitive. They really have to cover themselves. And they really have been stereotyped in Zambia to say they practice witchcraft and they do all sorts of bad things. And because they have been labeled like that, it's all of them are like that. You see, that is the understanding that we have. And I think that is the understanding that we need to change through impacting and making them understand that you are differently able, but you can still be part of the group. So maybe through inclusivity, using that formula, we might be able to foster coalitions between them so that they bring about collaboration and better understanding instead of labeling them vulnerable and then saying, that's it, they need help, they need help. But I think they can help themselves if they are really put forward to say, no, we are not implementing this on you. What do you think? How will you be able to help yourself? I think that would be a better approach. Instead of having the top down approach, probably we move it to the bottom up approach so that the acceptability part of it comes in. I think I've said a lot.
Everything very interesting. Thank you very much, Fatima. Especially when you mention about the way how labeling somebody can exacerbate their vulnerability. So putting labels on somebody is, as a matter of identification could be good for understanding, but I'm not so sure about belonging, right? So we need to work this out. Melissa, would you like to share your experience, please?
Yeah, of
Sorry,
course. I would like to put.
Yes, please.
Continue, Fatima.
Sorry, I just forgot one other thing. That is where the muted theory comes from for the communities who become muted because they don't want to express themselves. There's oppression on them. That is the reason. Okay? I just wanted to add.
Thank you very much, Fatima. Please, Melissa, go ahead.
Yes, of course. I want to continue in the line of Fatima because I agree completely about labels. No, in Mexican case, these labels are national labels. No, where you are indigenous, you are Afro-Mexican, you are white, you are middle class. So labels are useful for national policy. No, because they know how to put you in for certain projects, especially if you are part of vulnerable groups, no? Because, or for example, for housing policy or education policy, it's easier that you are located in one label, in one group, and you stay there. You don't change to other label, you don't move through the social classes or improve your economic conditions. And I think in this also top-down approach, no, it's easier for government, but it's made a lot of damage, especially in the last 50 years, 60 years, no, because there are some national statistics that says that especially indigenous women, they have less than 1% chances of improving their socioeconomic conditions, no? And if the government says it better stay like that, don't worry, I will give you money, I will give you housing, I will give you other stuff, but remain like that, poor, with your local language, and stay like that, no? And that don't help you to improve, no, to do something extra in your community, no. So these labels, thankfully, are being fight thanks to this decolonization approach, no, that especially these women associations in Quetzalan, they are like integrated, no, in their local speech, no. And therefore, and they are the best teachers to show us how to work from bottom to top down, no, and they are changing that, no. So for us, when we go as academics to the local communities, we are really going to learn, no, because we maybe we have the academic knowledge of certain aspect, but our opportunity, if we go to with students, with other colleagues, is to learn how they are doing and how we can implement in other contexts. No, so I think this how they fight labels, especially indigenous communities, female indigenous communities, they are already the masters. No, how to help us how to change, no, this national perspective.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Yes, I like how you brought to the discussion how labels can not only exacerbate vulnerabilities, but they can also become political conditions, right? And I remember that paper that we wrote together when we were speaking about the different gender dimensions of discrimination, where gender was one of the layers, but being indigenous, having a certain skin color, a specific level of education, living in a rural area, and so on, this can add some layers of discrimination. Thank you very much. Sad, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I just want to continue with what Fatma was sharing about the idea of inclusion, and I think it's very important in context of Pakistan. So what happened is, like, in terms of feminist movement and feminist activism in Pakistan, as I've already shared back in 2018, when the fourth wave of feminism started, it became more inclusive because it opened, the spaces were open not only for a woman in particular, but also for transgender persons, especially the transgender woman, because in Pakistan, it's part of South Asia, we have a huge population demographic of transgender women. So, and at the same time, it was also inclusive of the men who want to be the ally of feminist activism and who want to become part of this, the idea of gender justice. But again, the idea of inclusion and the idea of vulnerability, if we look at it from the perspective of critical men and masculinities, I also want to bring the question of how, for instance, men in Pakistan are kind of like, they are not being seen by the state, and they are not being seen as similar and as universal across Pakistan. Because right now, what we are also witnessing in one part of Pakistan, which is Balochistan, there's a huge human rights issue of, or rather humanitarian issue of missing persons, where the Baloch men who had a kind of historical grievances against the state and the administration have been abducted, have been disappeared. And as a result of that disappearances, as the result of those enforced disappearances, their families, and especially the women of their families, are now taking the lead against these so-called forced disappearances. So those men who are kind of completely taken away from the so-called existence, it's very important to also talk about their vulnerability, because their ethnicity and their special positionality vis-a-vis the state is especially very problematic, because the state considered them as continuing the policies of colonizers. They consider them as perhaps as traitors, or perhaps as someone who are not kind of in line with the state narrative of what an ideal person should be. So in case of Pakistan, the critical man and masculinity has a very broad scope. So it not only talks about the men and the inclusion of men for the rights of women, for feminist rights, but it also primarily talks about the other intersections. So for instance, how ethnicities and how, for instance, religious, and there are also persecution on the basis of religion, and men, women, and different groups are persecuted because of their identity. So for me, I think the whole core of the matter is, from a critical man and masculinity perspective, is to see the intersection of these social structures, and how, for instance, as a state which is very patriarchal, which is kind of a core of patriarchal power, how they treat men and women in different parts of the world, in different parts of Pakistan, for that matter. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Thank you very much. Yes, understanding feminist activism and how it has brought more inclusivity in the spaces in terms of transgender women, in the sense also of bringing in the elderly, children into the question when we plan our spaces is absolutely necessary. And then when we think about the effects of patriarchy, and people being persecuted because of their gender, but also because of their preferences, their beliefs, is something that we definitely need to challenge and restructure in our societies. Looking ahead, I would like to know, how do you envision feminist research reshaping urban policies? And practically, what can researchers or practitioners do today to accelerate this policy change? Maybe Fatima, can we start with you, please?
Okay, thank you. In terms of what can we do in terms of policy changes? Okay, the baseline I would think would be to conduct gender sensitive research. And how do you conduct gender sensitive research? Firstly, the starting point again would be my first point that I made. If we have not mainstreamed gender, say for example in the law curriculum, we don't expect our judgments to be gender sensitive. They will be gender blind, obviously, because the students will not understand that aspect. So the important point for me is how to see the integrated from the time the students enter the university and the change of mindset, so that when they go into practice, they should be able to see that this, okay, I'm talking from a legal perspective, this law is gender blind, or this policy does not cater for gender in any way. If we do not expose them at that stage, then we will not see the results when they are in practice. And I think that applies across the board to all the practitioners, whether you are a practicing surveyor, whether you are a practicing land expert, whether you are a practicing lawyer, whether you are a practicing doctor. And I think the medical field has even a deeper aspect when it comes to the rights of a woman, the health rights, and the right of the bodily right, and there's many things which are going to. So for me, there should be a change, starting from the way we approach the training to the actual practice, and finally to help policymakers think differently. I don't think in Zambia, I haven't yet come across. I've done a little bit of critique of the cases with Professor Munalula, but unfortunately, and she's a gender expert, she's on the Constitutional Court, but still, we haven't come across any judgments which really make reference to these theoretical impacts and how gender is influencing certain decisions which are being made by the courts. So we still have that patriarchal context which is going through and through and through and through somewhere. So we need to bring in the gender lens. That is one part I think we could do with that. The other part I was thinking was, if it is possible for us at some stage to develop gender tools. Now, I know UN has developed gender tools, World Bank has developed, but let me tell you, even for me as an academic to sit down with those tools, they're proving to be difficult. I want to see something which is more relevant to what we can see practically. And I think Melissa would have a better idea because she's actually on the ground doing that, and so would Sad, I guess. So I think I'll end there.
Thank you very much, Fatima. So maybe we can continue with you, Melissa.
Yeah, of course. I just want to add what already Fatma so beautiful said, that the gender, the feminist lens, I also will add, since university and educational levels, because especially if we work with future university students, future, in my case, architects, they will be changers, no political changers, no. So if they already have in their vocabulary the feminist approach, they will create more inclusive cities, not only due to how to transform cities that will be more safer for women, for vulnerable groups, for elders, for children. No, so I think the feminist lens, if we introduce really focus on, especially in university students, that will help to have more empathy, no, in general with society. That in this globalized world or focus on social media, I think the society became more individualistic, no, and they don't see what's happening outside this, no. So that, I think that's the beautiful thing of feminist lens, no. And also, if me as I work with indigenous communities, also having a co-research perspective is also necessary, because then we have this academic change that maybe what we study or what we research will go maybe on political level or policy or for policymakers, but we are treating indigenous female communities like the others, no, and not like doing a serious research that they are part of this political change or these political papers that we will, I don't know, give to political makers, no? So also core research is necessary, and also changing our perspective from an anthropocentric view to an ecocentric view, no? So because we are not the only ones, no, in this planet. Indigenous female women, they are the ones that are telling, hey, we are part of this unity. So also this change that we are not the only ones. And unfortunately, most of these urban policies, housing policies are based only on male human needs, no, but that we're not part of a whole, no. So I will add that, no, that it's necessary.
Thank you. Yes, so I suppose that bringing also or mainstreaming indigenous traditional knowledge into our educational systems would also help to yes, to blur the differences between the indigenous as the others and the rest of us, right? So we can come together, and the same happens with all the different intersectionalities that we were talking about. Thank you, Sad, please.
Yeah, so much great ideas to listen, and I am kind of very optimistic about the future. But I also feel like this is the right time to have maybe like a robust kind of a solidarity across the world, because what we are witnessing is a kind of a very sustained anti-gender backlash around the world. And I think webinars like these, events like this, where we are speaking to each other, where we are learning from each other, this is for me, I think personally, I believe this is the hour of the need that we should, as Fatma was also saying, as Melissa was also saying, to maybe think together and to bring the element of solidarity with each other, with the environment, with the people around us, and to think together what we can bring in terms of how can we construct the tools that Fatma was also referring to, the tool sets, that toolkit we need to have right now. Because what I am observing as part of this academia in Pakistan in Gender Studies department is the fact that there's a sustained anti-gender backlash that needs to be addressed actively. And I think for that matter, more and more research, I would say, on critical masculinity is also very important, because the rise of toxic, hegemonic, masculine men are sort of giving a kind of an idea to the younger generation, to the younger men, to the younger boys, that perhaps this is the right way of conducting yourself, which I believe is not, which is absolutely not. So I think what we also need to have is to have like ideal feminist men as part of the like larger structures, larger global, everywhere in the world, where the younger boys, the younger men could also look up to them and to see that these are the men that they want to follow, rather than those hegemonic and toxic masculine men who are supporting patriarchies in different forms. So I think the need of the hour is also to have research on critical men and masculinity, and to support those men who are also supporting women, who are supporting vulnerable groups, who are supporting all the indigenous people who are working together. Because I feel like for us, the goal is similar. We all are aiming for a similar goal. And we need to like sit together and to discuss and to brainstorm together how we can work together to maybe for the future that we all are aiming for.
Thank you very much, Sad. I think this is very important because, as you said, this is the right time for solidarity in a increasingly polarized world, and in view of this triple planetary crisis that we seem not to understand that it's planetary, that is affecting us, everybody, equally, regardless of our gender, of our preferences, or even the country where we're located. So this is the right moment to start questioning this traditional or conservative structures and integrate the feminist lens. Thank you all for such thoughtful reflections. I can see that there are no messages or no questions in the chat from our audience today. So as we near the end of our hour together, I'd like each of you to briefly share one practical insight or recommendation for those aiming to integrate feminist principles into their research practice. Maybe we can start this time in the inverted order, just to give it a twist. So, Sad, can we start with you?
Yeah, just briefly, I would reflect from my own experience that anyone who is interested in working on gender and researching on gender, think about yourself, because I think the slogan "personal is political" is very relevant now. So think about yourself, think about your positionality, reflect on where you are, and then connect yourself with the surroundings. And I think having a feminist lens in your research, whatever you are doing in your research, in your activism, would bring a kind of a perspective that is needed to the idea of gender justice. So I think for me, personal is political is something that is very relevant.
Thank you, Saad. Melissa, please.
I will strongly recommend to reflect on how you speak in your language, no, or which vocabulary you use to talk about women, to talk about elders, to talk about vulnerable communities. Because when you realize, no, how you speak, you will see how even some jokes that you said are completely sexist or machistas, as we say in Spanish, no, like machismo. And when you realize that even a joke can hurt people, and maybe you say, no, it's just a joke, no, but several jokes became no in a sexism problem, no. So reflect on how you talk, no, and then you will begin to be more empathetic as to others.
Thank you very much. Truly insightful. Fatima?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the one recommendation I would like to bring would be, if we can have, and building on both Sad and Melissa's contribution, if we can have a global activism, a change for women, by women, and affecting women, maybe we will bring it closer to the ground and have solutions. From a legal aspect, I think that would be the greatest thing that we can achieve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Saad, Fatima, Melissa, for this incredibly enriching conversation. Your insights and experiences are deeply inspiring. I'd also like to thank our audience for joining, and I guess we can continue these conversations beyond today. Thank you again, everybody, and goodbye.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
See you
Have a
soon.
pleasant evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.